I remember, and this is at release, and this I want to caveat, this is not hard mode, this is story dungeon.
Okay.
Going into Titan at level, at a Realm Reborn, at that point in the game, was difficult.
No judgment from me, I was a Dragoon. I was
At that
frequently
point,
not there for the end of the fight.
Exactly. Getting caught in an animation lock and getting hit by that landslide would knock you off the platform.
Tell our viewers that what the problem with that is compared to today. Nowadays, you just fall off, you get rezzed.
Yep, in that point in the game, you were just looking at the bottom of that crevice until the end of the fight.
Alright guys, welcome back to the party. Part 2 is this episode is where we're going to trade in our side quests for karaoke battles in Kamurocho and pull aggro in Final Fantasy XIV's toughest raids. We're diving into the world of Yakuza, where side quests matter just as much as the main story, and exploring the highs and hurdles of high-end raiding in Final Fantasy XIV. So it's time to put down those shogi warts, pick up your best in slot, and let's rejoin this side quest.
This is going to lead into something else in just a second, but you were just talking about high-tier raiding, end content. How have you... There's going to be 3 questions in one here, so feel free to answer them in any order. What keeps you coming back to high-end content? What is your favorite raid tier or fight in 14? And as someone that has progressed through World Firsts and is very involved in the end game content scene, the extremes, the chaotics, how do you balance and it is a very fine line in this between fun and competition and the work that goes into it, what still makes it fun and not a job and something that frustrates people?
So first off, it does frustrate people.
Yes.
But you need to learn how to channel that stress, because when you're in a high-end environment, the adrenaline to defeat the fight is going to be also the same type of adrenaline that can make you just snap at somebody, which I've done. It's not great. Don't do it. I have my demons. I bear them. I try to get better with them. The single thing that makes it enjoyable is playing with people you like to be around and play with. So for me, I want to be in an environment where I'm playing with players who are skilled and capable, but that I enjoy playing with, which is actually why this upcoming raid tier, we have like a retirement home of like friends who have played together, and we're going to raid, and we're all capable of getting world first, but we're kind of like, we're just vibing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah. Like we're not even prepping that much. Like we're just vibing. We're playing other games and we're just hanging out. And that is ideal for me. Like I've done a ton of prep before leading up into the Arcadian. We were playing like 4 or 5 days a week, and like we were doing a lot of hours and just a lot of different really stringent regimens with like, let's take this fight. And there are these handicaps and we'll try these different strats and we're not allowed to do this. And we got to do this and it's got to be perfect. And that was really fun too, because I enjoyed the company of the players we were prepping with. But then there were other groups that I played with where like I should have just probably not raided with them in the first place, because I could tell the vibes were off. But then we were like, yeah, we could probably make this work. And then we didn't. And people are like, you know, sometimes you're just incompatible with people. And it results in either one person or both people losing their cool or being offensive. And that sucks. So I have been world racing since the beginning of Stormblood. For a long time. Actually thinking back on it now, because what UCOP came out in 2017, which means that Delta Escape came out in 2017. So I've been doing it for 8 years. It's a long time.
Yep.
Very long. Oh, God, I'm so old.
Yep, you and me both.
Yeah, I think definitely the thing that makes it the most fun for me, well, the reason I want to do it in the first place is I like competition. And I like it. That doesn't mean competing against other teams necessarily. I am
competing with yourself.
I'm competing with the developers made for me, right?
Yes.
So like when you play an RPG in the hardest setting, it's the same thing. The developers have made this fight, and they don't do public test realms. For those of you who haven't done the high end already, there's no like test realms like WoW where you actually like know a little bit going into it. You don't. You don't know anything going into it. You know story mode when it unlocks, but like sometimes for a long time it was the same day as Savage. So you drilled through the 4 fights, then you went right into Savage. But now they give us a little buffer, right?
Yep. But even going from normal into Savage is the same fight, but it changed so much that it's not the same fight.
The first floor is very close to being the same fight, with like maybe 1 or 2 surprises. The exception of like Alt-Roit and Stormblood was the same fight. So people went in and they just one-shot it. Our team one-shot it too. Like 200 teams just one-shot that fight because it was the same. You could fall off the side. It was like the thing that changed. But yeah, nowadays, it's sort of the same. And then you get to the fourth fight, and it's completely different. And there's usually a second phase that just doesn't exist in normal mode, right?
Yep.
And it makes for a really good spectacle when you get to see that come together. Same with the Ultimates. Very fun, but you're playing it for a long time. So definitely playing with people that you enjoy the company of. And for a long time, I led a static of players that were really, really talented, really good friends. We did everything together. We played 7 days a week. We were speed running. So like I've also done speed runs. I have like a multiple rank ones for speeds there, or like parsing as well, which parsing is not for everybody. And if you don't like it, that's fine. For the people that do like it, you don't have to bash them either, right? There's both ends of the spectrum. I've done it on all sides because I was just very competitive and I was engrossed in Final Fantasy 7 days a week, all the time, always. You get to meet some really cool people that way too, which brings me to my favorite fight in the entire game. Now, there was a fight that I completed over 500 times before last expansion. I don't know if you know this, but it was the Unending Coil of Bahamut. That was the first ultimate. And so you said earlier you had a claim to fame because you have some people from the OG days that are still following you, right?
Yes.
I led the first team to complete Tank Cobb, which was UCOB with 8 tanks back when it was actually still difficult. Now it is kind of like a cakewalk, but it used to be difficult. And after we cleared that fight, Mr. Ozma himself followed me on Twitter, and it was the coolest thing that I had ever. I was like, oh my God, because I put a big thank you message. I was like, you've created such a beautiful experience and a wonderful fight, and I was so happy to challenge it in the most difficult way that we could. And it was so cool. That's probably my favorite fight that I'd experienced in Final Fantasy. I don't think today it's my favorite anymore because it's kind of gutted now when you go back to level 70 content, right? You're playing at a level 100 now. It's hard. But if they had offered you have the Unreal where they sync fights up. If they had Unreal for Ultimates, oh man, I think it would change the way you play. But they don't. Yeah, so that's fine. I think in recent times, the Cloud of Darkness was a really, really fun fight. Also, I think one of my favorite fights. So I was also part of some of the world firsts for the boss duels, the 1v1s. And those are exceptionally unique because it's just you. It's your skill. So Lion the Beast Tamer, easily one of my favorite fights in the entire game. It is a hard fight. The exoquakes were tough. Also DSR. DSR was a lot of fun, right? DSR was a lot of fun. Finally got to see what happens if you save Horshapan. Turns out, nothing good.
So, talking about progression and things like that, I remember the first, I started a bit late in this game.
Sure.
Not because I started late. No, I still started in Realm Reborn, but I was not with the level curve. I was working full time. I found a cool group of players, joined their FC, some of which I am still very close friends with in real life now. We meet up, all that sort of fun stuff. Sick. I remember, and this is a release, and this I want to caveat, this is not hard mode. This is story dungeon.
Okay.
Going into Titan at level, at a Realm Reborn, at that point in the game, was difficult.
No judgment for me. I was a Dragoon. I was frequently not there for the end of the fight.
Exactly. Getting caught in an animation lock and getting hit by that landslide would knock you off the platform.
Tell our viewers what the problem with that is compared to today. Nowadays, you fall off, you get rezzed.
Yep. In that point in the game, you were just looking at the bottom of that crevice until the end of the fight.
Any fight where you could fall off and it was like a big drop, you were just gone. You Sonicked out of existence on Leviathan, right?
Yeah.
You're drowning Leviathan, at the bottom of the ocean.
I don't remember if that was still in place for Bismarck.
Yes.
But yeah.
Because you would lose a tank and you'd have to wipe. Because you get to the ads phase
and everyone would jump off. Yeah. Even going back now, playing, for example, a new character, I don't know whether the fight obviously hasn't changed. The mechanics are 99% the same with a few.
We can make a different reference here, right? Because obviously it's easier now and you know what to do.
Yes.
And the network has changed, right? Back then, server ticks updated at a longer interval than they do now. Yep. So you would get out of an AoE, but the game wouldn't have sent the packet yet.
Yes.
So the game has gotten easier.
So infuriating. That and the point.
Did you remember the Temple of Karn?
Yes.
Did you have a hard time with that too?
Not so much that. More what's the
So
one with
I
all
did.
the what's the one with all the poisons?
You mean with the dragon?
Yeah.
Well, there's two. There's one where you move really slow through the 1,000 miles of Totorak, and then
That's
there
the
was
one.
yeah, that one was horrible.
Yep. But also that fight, Titan was balanced for that iteration of the game.
Correct.
Jobs have updated, abilities have been replaced, abilities have been removed, abilities have been made more powerful for...
We have ways to resist knockback.
Yes, sometimes they don't work, which is totally not user error.
That's true.
Sometimes they do. But how do you feel that, just before we move on to the story aspect of the game,
Sure.
how do you feel the fights have improved and just changed mechanics? Like,
It's
the
tough.
quick maths meme that went down.
So you can't, there are quotes from the devs that you cannot use. And one quote is that fights are never designed to have sprint or anti-knockback in mind. But this was around the time when, you remember, you would sprint and you just lose all your TP. TP was a resource for us to use our skills. We don't have that anymore. But like, it existed in 11, it existed in 14. And you would sprint and you would get X number of seconds based on the per 100 TP that you utilized.
Yep.
And then you were bottomed out. And that was it. And you had to like slowly regenerate. Sometimes you were just doing this, just waiting to be able to attack again. It was horrible. It was really, really bad. But fights were designed
Around that
for you
mechanic.
to not, like maybe you had to sprint, but if it was a situation where sprint was going to help you, usually the DPS check was lenient or there was downtime coming up. Right. So it's
Yes.
fine. Nowadays, everybody can sprint, and you even have scholars expedients, right? That this lets you sprint for free. And now we have anti-knockback mechanics because all players can press it. There are absolutely times now where they intend for you to use those. So I think the natural progression of the game is better, but not every player may be used to that. And I also think some controller players find difficulty in managing play in their game and taking care of their puppies. I do think I've heard some complaints from players who play like Astrologian on controller, for example, where they're like, just use this anti-knockback. Like, I don't know where I'm going to put that on my bar.
Yep.
Like, can you Asuna me? No, I can't.
I can 4 levels ago when I needed it.
Yeah. But like, I think that the game has progressed to a point where we have more tools now, but our rotations are so simple.
Yes.
I don't like that. Like,
No.
it's not all good.
No.
I do think skill expression. So the problem is like, okay. So listen, Stormblood was the best raid series ever. I'm just going to say that. Omega was the best raid series ever. There's a reason why I said Yukov is my favorite fight. There's a reason why something like O11F stands up to this day. Halicarnassus is probably one of my favorite fights in the entire game. Now I'm circling back to that. Halicarnassus was awesome. You were rewarded limit break for doing mechanics correctly. You would get entire bars, and you had multiple different arenas and ways that you had to solve that fight. It was so cool. Halicarnassus, super good fight. Might be my favorite fight of all time. Super good fight. Very well designed. Perfect in my opinion.
The only raids I've had the time to do Savage was Sigma Delta Escapes.
There you go.
And-
Midgard Stormer sucked. I'm just going to say that now.
And at that point, I was running Dark Knight.
Okay.
And
That was when I first started playing Dark Knight, ever.
I refused, and I still do, to look at guides.
That's fair. Me too. Which sounds hypocritical because I write them, but like...
Yeah. But I want to learn the fight. I want to learn from my own mistakes. I want to learn what to do. If there is a mechanic that I've been struggling with for quite a long time, then I will ask someone to give me a bit of help, or I'll look at a guide for that specific mechanic if I myself cannot work out how to bypass it. And at that point, I am holding up other players.
I mean, there's a reason why I world race, right? You can't have a guide if you do it right away.
Yep, exactly.
It's very, very good. Both from a rotation as well, right? Because like I like to use oh man, I've said this before and people think I'm weird for it. I play games to use my brain. Sometimes people play games
100%.
to turn their brain off. And that's fine. There are games for that, but like maybe Minecraft, I'll just go like, smash a wall, right? But I want to use my brain if I'm playing these games.
But that is the good thing about 14. There are aspects that do both. You can go and manage
fishing with the boys.
Go manage your island sanctuary. I love that thing.
I capped that out in 2 days when it came out. I picked up rocks for like 15 hours.
So just touching on what you said about a lack of rotation.
Dude, it's so much easier now than it's ever been.
Yeah. So this is not just talking about Final Fantasy here. How do you feel and games these days, with the exception of the obvious ones like Elden Ring, Dark Souls,
The Elder Scrolls.
exactly. Do you feel that there is too much hand-holding? You were talking about Monster Hunter Wilds, how you now have infinite inventory.
There are things, yes, I've discovered some tech in Monster Hunter, right, that they don't tell you in the controls. But nowadays, like in Wilds, they are seriously like, here's your combo, here's how you do things, right? There's a lot of menus now to tell you how to play. It was not always like that.
No, all you got when you went back in my day, back when I had to read a newspaper to find out what games were coming out. All the information you
the
got
Game
was
Informers, right? And then they come out with like the Nintendo official guides for games. If you wanted to, like, it's like, I need to know where to find these things. Well, you can only get it if you spend $30 on this book.
All the information that we got initially was whatever was on that 3-page manual that they threw in the box.
Which game had the guy who suplexed a chain? Is that 6 or is that 5?
I don't recall.
Final Fantasy, I think it was 6, right? Had Sabin? He played, so he was a monk, right? But basically, like, we don't have to know which, I'm pretty sure it's 6. Basically, you had to put in fight controls.
6.
Yeah, so you had to do like a Shoryuken. But it didn't tell you that unless you had the guide. So you had to you had to open up the instruction manual, because when you first get to Sabin, it's like, use this move. And I'm like, I don't know how to use this move, because I was playing on the SNES Classic. I'm like, I don't know how to use this move. I had to look up game FAQs to find out how to do this combo with him. And yeah, it's like they just expect you to figure it out.
Well, it's like a good example, and this crops up a lot in memes, where it is literally just a picture of a PlayStation with a controller plugged into port 2. Going, do you know what game this is?
I don't.
And so, Metal Gear Solid, there was a boss called Psycho Mantis that his whole thing was he was psychic. If you had your controller plugged into port 1, it read your moves.
Oh my god, but port 2 it would not?
But port 2, it wouldn't. So if you had it in port 1, there was no physical way to beat the boss. It was impossible.
That's sick.
Categorically impossible.
That's sick.
Had to unplug your controller and put it into port 2 to get through that boss.
I love that.
And that is not something you could Google. It didn't exist. It's something you had to work out.
Or be really mad and quit.
Yes, or be really mad and quit. And I'm sure that happened to some people. But, like, playing...
To be fair, 14 doesn't handhold your rotation. You still got to figure it out, and that's where players come into play.
They have simplified
easy, right? Everybody's got a 2-minute burst, and that's bad. So we used to have 90s and 210s and all sorts of things, and 80s.
And if you missed a button, it messed everything up.
Well, it messed things up less than it does now. If you had, so Blood of the Dragon, which is, I'm sorry, you had Blood for Blood, right? Which is now Dragonlance or something. I don't know what it's called nowadays, but it was an 80-second cooldown. You were supposed to hold it and use it at the 90. However, now everything's a minute or 2 minute, right?
Yep.
So what happens if you delay that by 10 seconds? You can't just bring it back the next time. It's now delayed out of people's buffs and burst forever for the rest of the fight. So while they synced things up to make it easier, if you misplay now, you are punished more than you ever have been.
So you either lose out on 10 seconds for the rest of the fight, or you have to withhold it for the next rotation.
Sometimes it's like 45 seconds into Black Cat, and then I see Chain Stratagem pop up on the boss, and I'm like, what are you doing? Where did it... Hello? And I'm like, well, guess we're not having that for the rest. It's so funny, but like, it's not a big deal. Like, it affects your parse, and like some people are going to sweat over that, and you're not supposed to judge out the players on it. But I don't think it's judging to offer advice to sync things up, or to want the devs to create a system that allows you to have wiggle room, right? I think that should be fine.
I have recently started playing Classic WoW on the anniversary servers that have just released.
What expansion are they on?
Literally, it's a fresh release, so it's vanilla.
I thought they classicked up to Wrath. Or did they do it again?
They're on Classic Cataclysm, and then for the 5th anniversary of Warcraft, they've released a fresh set of servers for those who missed it that are going to progress one expansion a year.
I see.
So I've just joined that, and I have found myself what I am going to call a unicorn of guilds.
Sure.
They are the most... So they are already clearing Elixir and Molten Core, which have just released. But they don't care what job you play.
Sure.
They don't care how you're spec'd. They
Sure.
don't give a crap about what gear you wear. They said this game is designed to be beaten how you want to play. So you can play how you want to play, and we'll work with it.
The big difference now, though, is that you do know the fights, right?
Yes.
So, like,
But
you can play whatever you want because you know the fights. But I think if you were blind, like, there were a couple of raid tiers in WoW where, like, if your team weren't all Horde, you wanted to play Horde Blood Elves because they had, like, really good racials or something.
Yep,
It was like, okay,
yeah.
if you're not doing that, we're just not clearing the raid. So, like,
Yep. But
nowadays,
that's not
you're
how
fine.
the fights are designed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's something I want to touch on with the difference between World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy raids.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy raids, for the most part, it's one fight.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft is a series that they work more like alliance raids, but they take the same amount of time to clear for people to learn the fights, do the mechanics. Do you think it is more monotonous, just learning different phases of one fight, or like how?
So,
Like,
I
what do you
rated-
think the advantages of each style of endgame raiding is?
I raided through Wrath of the Lich King. I left. I came back for Battle for Azeroth. That was a mistake. I raided through Mother. I left. I came back for Dragonflight. Is that the
Yep.
one that had Razor Fang, the Thunderclaw? I don't know his name.
I stopped before Dragonflight.
His name began with an R. I just don't remember it. RH something. Basically, it was this thunder dragon, right? They were
Yep.
like corrupted dragons and stuff. And like suddenly, what was it? Deathwing? Is that the guy from Cataclysm?
Yep.
He had like a son or something. And then there was like the battle for who's going to be in charge of the dragons and stuff.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, that sounds like Dragonflight.
Yeah. So in Dragonflight, I did the first tier there too. And granted, it was a big gap. And I think like combat changed a lot from Wrath into BFA into Dragonflight. It got easier. Dragonflight was actually probably the most Final Fantasy-like than WoW's ever been. But I think it's because they were finally like, look, Final Fantasy is more popular than us. What are they doing? What can we change? And that was fine. WoW both suffers and succeeds from having a, what do they call it? Like the adventure log or something? Where
Yeah.
you can look at the mechanics that you're going to see in the fight. You can look up the loot, but you could look up the mechanics, and it actually has it separated by role, right? Like it's like if you are a healer, you must watch out for this debuff because if you don't cleanse it, you're gonna wipe. And it's like on tanks, you need to watch out for this, and if you get up to X number of stacks, you're going to wipe. It's like it holds your hand. And it takes out the blind progression to an extent, like for heroic, right? I don't think it does that for mythic, but at least up to heroic, it like tells you basically what to do.
Yeah.
And I don't innately like that. Like I'd rather just figure it out because I'm pretty good at figuring it out, but not everybody will be. So in those aspects, I think it succeeds, right? It helps you be able to play whatever you want because it's like, hey, here's the basic idea. So you see this and you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to bring my blood DK because I'm not going to be able to jump around. I'm going Vengeance Demon Hunter because now I'm going to be able to traverse the map. If you're going to be knocking my butt back, I want to be able to jump back up here. These types of things are very important. And maybe in Final Fantasy, something happens and you're like, all right, how many AoEs did we get hit by? 2, I think. And it turns out it was 3 and now it's a role-based mechanic. You know, but in WoW, it's like, okay, you're going to have 2 people targeted by this, and it's going to hit these number of peoples, and if you're close to the boss, you're going to die. So I guess it's not necessarily an answer to your question, but I think WoW has a really good setup there, and they don't ban add-ons, but they also
encourage
design them, for them to be encouraged. And I think they probably draw inspiration from what people have developed as tools onto how they can evolve the next raid series. That being said, you can absolutely clear the raids without add-ons. It's just so much more difficult. But I did it. I didn't want to use add-ons, so I didn't. But it made it harder. But there are ways to still see what you need to see. Like Waycrest Manor is a good example. I had a friend at one point be like, "How do you know what mechanics are happening? Did you look? Because we were doing it blind." And I was like, "No." They're like, "But you're not using was it auras or something like that?
Deadly boss mods and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And I'm like, I know I'm not using it, but underneath the boss's name that's an orb debuff on which one we need to attack. Like, I didn't even realize that was there. I'm like, and you won't if you're paying
Because you're
attention to all
playing
your
with
UI
add-ons.
stuff.
Yeah. So what do you make of the low blow that Blizzard took on Square Enix with their new player housing announcement? Did you see it?
I did not see it.
Okay, so I've got a snippet up here.
Are they giving everybody a
whole,
house?
There's a whole article,
Okay.
but the focus is this is just one section from the article. As a part of our focus on wide adoption, we wanted to ensure that housing is available to everyone.
Oh,
If you want a house, you can have a house. There are no absorbent requirements, no high purchase costs, no lotteries, no onerous upkeep, and if your subscription lapses, your house doesn't get repossessed.
the first two you could probably say are like based on other games, but that last half is all Final Fantasy. Man.
Houses are shared amongst your warband, with different characters able to come and go as you see fit. Housing rewards are shared across your warband, so you'll be able to use your collection, your decoration
instant?
collection, no matter
Like,
which
how do you see
character
somebody
has
else's
it.
house? Do they have that
Right.
listed?
So this is another thing. So before we go in, like, let's just carry on reading here. Before we go, we want to mention the concept of neighborhoods. Houses are organized into roughly 50 plot neighborhoods, letting players live next to each other, work together, and share in the rewards of being part of the neighborhood.
Fair.
Neighborhoods are instant, but also crucially persistent. So your neighbors can be your neighbors for years to come, unless one of you moves. Neighborhoods come in two flavors: public neighborhoods, which the game servers are responsible for creating, needing, and maintaining, and private ones, which are created by groups of friends or guilds to inhabit, progress, and customize together.
Do they have screenshots of like what the houses are like too?
They
Because like, obviously
have-
Final Fantasy has small, medium, and
Yeah.
large, right? But I wonder if it's going to be 50 of like the same house and then you customize it as you see fit.
I think it's 50 at the same house. I will put the link to this article in the description. I'll have some pop-ups going on for the
Final
final
Fantasy take
final
notes.
thing.
They gave us all an island sanctuary, but like,
There's a lot to do, and it's actually making me want to play Retail WoW again for the first time in a long time.
okay, so this is when you ask me what my favorite housing system in MMO is, because I played a lot of MMOs. And then I tell you it's Tibia. Tibia had a housing system where it was all overworld, right? So you could PvP anywhere, but your houses were safe zones. So you really wanted to have a house. And the way you got a house is you would put a bid on it on the website. And then you'd have a week to
Wow.
bid. So like nobody would be bidding on it. Then you put the amount of money that you want to spend, and it will take out the minimum amount required to win. So if you're like, I have 1 million gold, it would be like, okay, current bid is 0.
So
and then
it kind of
you look
works
on the
like
website.
eBay auto bidding.
Yeah. And then so like you would go on and you'd be like, Rin has this at 0. And then you're like, okay, I'll bid 1,000. And then it goes, Rin has this at 1,001.
Yep.
And then finally you bid up and it's like, now you have it at 1,000,001. And the thing about you counter bidding is you don't actually have to have the amount of money that it says to outbid somebody. But by the end of the week, you better, or else you're going to be penalized for lying.
Fair enough.
But it was cool because it was a community-driven cash sink. So like we had our economy, and the way that they drained our economy was, so I got to get wireless headphones because those are so cool that you could just get up and do whatever you need to do, because sometimes my puppies need their attention. But yeah, you would just bid, and by the end of the week, like, it was a good way to drain the economy and keep it going in a way that meant something. Like, you're like, okay, is this house worth this much to me? No, I don't want it. I can go for a different one.
So that leads quite nicely onto what I want to talk about next. Communities in different games. I said we'd come back to it. The big reason is in Final Fantasy XI specifically, if we've talked about XP penalties, level downs, all that sort of stuff. A way to negate part of that was being resurrected. If you teleported to your home point,
yes, I know.
Yeah.
Oh,
so if you teleported to your home point, you lost straight up 10% of your XP.
yeah.
And then there were 3 tiers of raises that white mages could perform that negated more and more of that XP. In Final Fantasy, as a white mage, 99% of the community, you did not walk past a down player without raising them. You did not walk past a solo person fighting without putting a regen on them or giving them a cure or giving them some
Keep
form
them
of buff.
alive.
It was the same with... So mobs were locked. If you targeted a mob, you weren't in a party, no one else could attack that monster. But there was a call for help mechanic. The downside of the call for help mechanic, it then negates all XP and loot that monster could drop. But if anyone called for help, it popped up on your minimap, so anyone could see it. If someone wasn't busy, they would rush over and help to stop you potentially losing 10% of XP. And when you got to the 70 plus levels, it could take up to a month to get a level.
It was really bad.
I found the same thing very similar in Classic WoW. Doesn't happen in retail. In Classic WoW, when the first Classic WoW came out, I can't speak for whether it happened on the American servers or not, but on the English servers, when you started as an orc there's a scorpion you've got to kill for a quest at the very, very start. You can tell people are British when they queue. There were queues going back where people would group up in a party, kill the monster with the 5 people that were in front of them, they'd kill it, move on, and the next people would move up. And there are screenshots of this happening.
That's so funny. That was like Robon's Wall in Stormblood. We made a line in Balmung. And people said the line didn't help because of instant servers, but it did help because Balmung had thousands of players who were actively waiting in line, which meant they weren't queuing.
Yeah.
So it helps. So I was laughing that whole explanation because I told you that I got my friend killed by sitting.
Yep.
The white mage. Taru?
Yep.
Is that what they're called? A Taru ran by them and stopped. And he was like, res please. And they said, don't have. And then cast spells at a higher level than resurrection. And then ran away.
That is also possibly feasible because I don't know for Raze specifically, it's been so long, but there were some spell scrolls that were locked behind quests that you needed help to do. Some of them were only buyable from NPCs and they were exorbitant prices. They were really expensive because it was either you pay the NPC price or it's got a 3% drop rate from a specific monster in a specific zone.
But sometimes people were just a little trolly.
Oh,
there was
100%.
There was a big stigma there with culture, right? Like the JP community did not want to play with non-JP players in some facets of the game.
Yeah. I think a lot of it at that time was probably due to the amount of communication that would need to happen for certain fights.
That's what I heard. Because then you're just shit out of luck, right? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And Square Enix tried to alleviate that with the auto-translate function. And it worked to an extent. But yes,
But that plays into my Tibia story too, because the way communities worked there were, if you were from North America, you started in the Swamp City and you stayed in the Swamp City because it's open world PvP. And if you were Brazilian, then you would go start off in the Crown City with the king. And then if you were, I want to say the last area was if you were Polish, you started in Karlin, which is like the Queen's City. And then anybody else just started wherever they wanted. But as you would run into a group of players, they would ask you if you spoke their language. And if you didn't, they killed you on the spot. It was really bad. But like, people were very like, patriotic, right? So it was like a lot of guild versus guild and guild stuff because of what you said, the language barriers. So obviously, if you're trying to have this PvP stuff, you want to be able to communicate, and there was no auto-translate. So you met up with players who shared your latency and shared your language and shared your times of day. So it was very like, I learned Portuguese in that game very fast. And then suddenly I got to travel between cities. I started learning a little bit of Polish, but like the enemies up there just weren't good for me. So I didn't go that way a lot. But like as the game progressed, there'd be more cities and people started branching out. And in a way, it sounds very segregatory, but it also forced me to learn something that I may not have otherwise.
Yeah. So I'm going to circle back really quick before we move on.
Yeah.
With progression with Final Fantasy XIV, obviously Endwalker was the end of a X amount of expansion saga. It's the end of a storyline. Stakes got higher and higher for our characters, and
there were
Dawn
ripple
Tread
effects
has
on
been
the salmon population.
Exactly, and we won't even get started on grapes.
There is lore behind that. When they trapped Bahamut and Dalamud, It like messed up the population of fish.
And we've had a reset with Dawn Trail. We're in a new area. There are, touch wood, currently no world-ending threats in play that are going to blow up our planet. Dawn Trail has had, at least on release, a lot of criticism for, one, our character not being the main character, and then obviously
screw
the
that.
unfortunate... Yeah, I completely agree with you. And then the unfortunate criticism of Woodclamat's voice actor, which is, again, no need for that whatsoever.
Woodclamat did a good job.
She's absolutely fantastic. If they didn't do basically a factory reset on the game and give someone else the spotlight or minimize the potential outcome of the story to being world-ending, because we've had world-ending for
the
different...
universe-ending and Endwalker, right? They were like, all creations going bye-bye.
What I personally don't see another direction they could have taken. If they went for more world-ending calamities, they'd have got criticized for doing the same thing. They're getting criticized for doing something different. It almost feels like game developers can't do anything right. No matter what they do, they're going to get criticized. I personally feel that this is the right direction to take. Very excited to see where this next story arc is going to go and how it's going to progress from we're helping someone claim the throne to whatever it becomes. There is a multitude of directions it can go. There's the whole time skip thing we've got going on. How do you respond?
It's dimensional travel, like obviously visit other shards, and there are people from other shards here now. Like,
and so that's again another big thing. Essentially, they have just made Vana'diel from Final Fantasy XI canon in for. Do you think?
I think people were suspecting for a while that something out to the west, like people were like, "Oh yeah, the Mamulja like came from there, like through a portal or something." Because like a lot of the models and assets are obviously ripped right from 11, right?
Yes, and then just updated. Do you think they could have done anything else after Endwalker?
Yes. Or they could have not made it 3 hours before you fought your first enemy in Dawn Trail. Single-handedly the worst thing about the entire MSQ. How long did it take you to get into combat? You had to go out and you had to meet beast tribes. Well, it was like allied society quests, right? You met the Pelu Pelu, you did the trades, and eventually you got to do stuff. When you started in Stormblood, the very first thing you did was you were going out to other areas, right? You're like, okay, we're immediately going to go out to like the peaks and the fringes and stuff. And then like, here we go. We're going to travel across the sea. And oh, now we're in Siren Song Sea, right? Okay, boom, right away. You get into Shadowbringers and you're like, okay, here's 2 maps. And now you're in your first dungeon. Here it was like,
it took a while.
It was 2 maps, but it was 2 maps of so much unskippable cutscenes and like the building of Tural. I'm going to let my puppy in the room. And I'm
no worries.
I don't want to get angry at this thought. Okay, puppy, come on. Hi, little puppy. All right, so, sorry, getting the door was unskippable. I couldn't prevent it. Much like the MSQ. Hi, little puppy. I think that I dislike when you go to a new area now in Final Fantasy and they make you escort an NPC and learn every single spot and every single aetheryte. When I first got to Solution 9 with my friends, before starting the story, we ran around together. And we explored the map, and we had some really funny memories. And we were like, oh my God, look at this, and oh my God, look at that, and this is so cool. If they just stopped making an NPC escort us throughout the entire thing, I think you'd have more moments like that. But now it's like, go to the market. Go over to this aetheryte. Go over to this spot. It's like, okay, you couldn't just let me do this on my own?
No. Yeah, so the first thing I always used to do whenever I got to a new settlement or big city in Final Fantasy is I run around and grab all the aetherytes. Very first thing I did.
When you first went to Quarthus in A Realm Reborn at like level 35 or whatever, you go into the snow area, did you ascend the observatory as soon as you saw it? We didn't really have a reason to go up there for a while, but I was like, I want to go up to the top and jump off.
I honestly can't remember what I did. I think the first time I went there, I was in a party and we were blasting through the game. So I didn't have the time. Well, I had the chance, but I didn't explore. We were just doing things.
Were you guys doing Fates too?
I've never done much of Fates, unfortunately.
Just before that, you know, Palace of the Dead?
Yep.
Like just outside of that area, there was a fate chain is why I bring this up. I don't know if you ever did it back then, but it's like this coral settlement and the gates are normally closed. And then when this fate pops open, the gate's open and you could actually go in and fight. It's kind of whatever. There's like a little mini boss and stuff. But I would wait for that fate, and every time it would spawn, I would go in just to be in that area because it was exclusive and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, so you're not really a fate kind of guy?
It's just not something I've done, not through lack of wanting. It's just that I've always had other things I've been doing.
Sure. Do you
I kind
ever
of
do any for the reward? Like if it's like a minion or something that you get out of it?
I am an avid minion collector. I have over 300. Quite a lot of them now are either the really expensive ones or the store-bought ones that I don't have.
Did you get the
I don't have
it's like
any
the
from
hunting
the-
hawk or something?
If I may have bought that one off the auction house.
There
the
was
marketplace.
it was like diadem only, the very first diadem, the one where you actually fought, and then at one point they added it as like a Moogle Tome reward or something, and I was like, oh my god, this is gonna tank in price. But at one point
Same
it was
as-
really exclusive.
Same as Morpho.
Yeah,
The moment the moment they added that into the rewards for the firmament.
was Morpho from Amdapor Keep? It was from
I
one of
can't-
those places,
It
right?
was from one of the dungeons, and it had a minimal chance to spawn in a chest.
Yeah. All right. So what topic were we on? Yeah. So Dawn Trail, what could it have done differently? I mean, we can't have a great pinnacle. There's no build up. You would just build from
Yeah.
nothing and then just have like, here we are again. I think that's dumb. What I do think is missed opportunities are like, dude, Ishtola is like all about this like interdimensional travel stuff and going to other shards, and we didn't have her there for this. Instead, we had her like hold the gate open. Like that's
Yeah.
you would think she would be at the forefront of going to another place, no?
My criticism my biggest criticism of Dawn Trail is the fact they had Kryl as the poster girl for Pictomancer. This
But then she
Pretty
spends
much-
like the whole expansion not doing it.
exactly. She came because she wants to find something out. She wants to find out about her past. She is, at least lore-wise, heavily involved in the story.
She was
And
aloof
she's
about
not-
aloof.
There.
Okay, how about when they invade Tural?
Yep.
And all of the Scions are like, and they're not fighting back. We would not do that. I had such a
Nope.
big problem with that because we would literally not watch people die, right? We would immediately stop it. So I think of Stormblood, which people didn't really like the story in Stormblood either, right? But you remember when Ralgers was getting attacked by Xenos? Ishtola just immediately showed up and like shielded stuff, and then she got her butt kicked, but like no hesitation, jumped right in to save all these people who were powerless. Where were we in Tural? I had a really big problem with that. And then you go out to Shaloni and Estinian single-handedly destroyed everything. We could have too.
Because he
is the guy. My biggest criticism, that's my second biggest criticism. My single first biggest criticism is that we're sent on this journey to help Uklamat ascend to the throne, right? We just chose her side.
Yep.
As we go, we find out that like not everybody's quite so bad, and really it actually
Yeah.
isn't about picking a successor. It's about teaching them all a lesson. Right?
Yeah.
Because he's like, they all lack what they need to be. Like none of them are actually worthy right now because they just
Mhm.
don't get it. We want them to learn about their culture. I wanted more time in Kona's perspective, in Kulja's
Yeah.
perspective. Why didn't we get these
Even if-
situations where we get more about them?
even the flashback cutscenes would have been acceptable.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, it would have been us playing as one of the other Scions, like with them, or getting to play as them, right?
Yeah.
Like, why
And
not?
We've done that in the past.
Like, we got to do a Wuklamat fight, but why couldn't we do the other ones and experience them too? And then suddenly we're meant to care about, like, but Cool Jaja has like this redemption area, and we're like, oh my god, he's so cool. And he is, right? But like, if you were going to have the Scions sit at the sidelines when Troll gets invaded, then but Cool Jaja is actually, that's because that's his moment, right? That's where he's like, he's defending his people.
Yeah, that's his
We
big
should have
thing.
done that. We should have been as him, or it should have shown his journey of coming back into the city, be like, oh shit, here we go. And like, more on him. I think that would have been great.
Yep,
But
I
it's
think so.
a big criticism I have is like, if you're going to make us not the main character, you can make Wuklamat the central focal point. Please let us learn about the other people from this world. If you're trying to build a new chapter, teach us the chapter, right? And now suddenly like Kona's like the other person in charge, and we're like, yeah, great, we know still kind of nothing about him. He's good with
Yeah.
relations, and Oriandra and Thancred picked him. I love Thancred. Tell me why. That's the problem I have. I think that it's a very big missed opportunity for them to have granted us third-person perspectives, right? Like,
I mean, yeah. I mean, Yoshi P is the biggest troll in the world, especially when it comes to treasure dungeons. So you never know what he's planning for the future.
that's true. That's true.
It's just now moving back to where we were.
Well, regarding the story point, I should also say that I have a skewed opinion, but it's also maybe an important note. This was the first story in all of 14 that I've ever wanted to and actively skipped. I went back and watched it on a second character, and I missed exactly nothing. I was confused. I was sure that I'd be confused at moments and be like, "What is going on?" It was all fine.
Yeah,
I missed basically nothing, and that's a problem to me. How would you feel if you skipped story and you didn't miss a beat? Because then, like, there were people coming into chat afterwards and like, "You don't get it. All of this happened," and I'm like, "Yeah, I understand." Like, how could you? You skipped him, like, because it's obvious. I'm running from this point to this point. It's stuff's on fire. People are dead. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, but I suppose that kind of leads on back to our discussion now about RPGs and MMOs in general.
Sure.
How do you feel about modern day MMOs like Retail WoW, Final Fantasy? Do they still have the same impact? Do they capture the same magic as the old ones? Or do you feel because there is such a wide variety, and don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy and World of Warcraft are the big two, but there are so many MMOs now. You've still got ESO, Guild Wars is still going, Aeon 2 is about to be released, BDO's coming back out.
Let me ask you a question. How long have you been playing MMOs?
Since 2004.
Okay.
Back when it was still Final Fantasy and then a load of anime MMOs that were downloaded like Fiesta and Flife.
Oh, I played Maple Story, Flife.
Yep.
I played Conquer Online. I mean, I could go up Ragnarok Online. I put so much time into. Ragnarok's a great one. Did you have more time then than you have now?
I did.
Me too. There is perspective to be had, right?
Yes.
So I think when judging MMOs now, you and I at least have time against us because we have been spending so long in them. And the more you're saturated by something, the more desensitized you're going to become, which I think is why nowadays people have the internet and everything available at such a young age that, like, nobody has patience. Young generation, old generation, like, nobody has patience anymore.
Seeing 3-year-olds with iPads just blows my mind.
Mm-hmm. So do you think an MMO that is ultra grindy would survive today if it didn't have any sort of, like, if it was a brand new IP? I don't think it could survive.
But yeah,
and that's a problem because the other side of it is you make the challenge so menial, right? Like, when you're leveling in Final Fantasy, people who want the leveling experience aren't really going to get it. Like, some people can make alts and stuff, but you're just running dungeons over and over. It's the same content, right? So we have kind of like a boring loop, which is why I like raids. And the way I'm playing the game now is kind of like I'm coming back to the game because the raids are engaging and enjoyable.
Yes.
And then when we're done with the raids and I've got my best in slot, I will stop and play something else. And that is not bad.
No, it's
so
not.
Many people identify with one game and, like, I never would have gotten to play. So, dude, the Like a Dragon, like Yakuza RPG series, I had not played it before.
Have you just started playing it out? So I saw you've just recently played the Pirate Yakuza.
It's confusing to say because over here it's called Yakuza, but it's always been called Like a Dragon in Japan, I think. So if I say I played Yakuza Like a Dragon, I do mean the Ichiban game because that was called Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Like Dragon.
That was my first one.
Okay.
And I played it when it was new, but I played it off stream because I'm like, well, it doesn't really, like, it's not the Final Fantasy 14 like kind of vibe, and it's definitely much more mature, right?
Yep. And it's also the first one that was turn-based.
Yes, because, like, Ichiban's a big Dragon Quest fan.
Yes.
And I think what happened was, if I remember correctly, I read something where, because it's Sega, right? And they had put out an April Fool's joke about a turn-based Like a Dragon, and so many people were like, holy shit, yes. That they were like, oh, okay, yes. But, like, what I'm learning about the Yakuza series is they're not afraid to just go off the rails with whatever they want to do.
%. So I have played through them all with the exception of Inshin, which is the
I got a question for you then.
Japanese-themed one.
Do they
First
always
off-
have a chicken?
Ooh.
Okay,
No,
you know what I
not
mean?
as
There's
far
like
as
the
I-
chicken
The
guy
summoner.
well, so like in Like a
So
Dragon,
there
there's the little
are-
chicken dude, and in Pirate Yakuza, there's Chicken Man.
There are so many reoccurring elements. Do you play it in English dub or Japanese dub?
I play it in Japanese with the English subtitles.
Yeah. Okay. So that is so good. Just a side note, the person who voices Majima in English is Matt Mercer.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But yeah, so
No slight against the English voice cast, by the way. I'm all for
no,
it.
100%. I also listen to it in Japanese. The
it's
emotion is there.
So good. Dude, Japanese voice actors hit like a different level. I don't know how to explain it. But like when they start screaming and stuff, it's like
what I love about the Yakuza games is the story is so in depth. It's so serious. There are things coming that you don't see happening. The twists, the plot twists. You know there's going to be one,
but you
still
just don't
can't
know how
predict
it's
it.
coming. Well, also
But
like I
the
lose
side
myself on
quests are so
that.
goofy.
They're like the best out of any game I've ever played.
100%.
Sometimes I forget that I'm not doing MSQ because they put so much into them.
Yep. So I am halfway through a replay of Yakuza 0.
Do you recommend that one?
I recommend playing them in chronological order with the remasters.
0 first.
So 0 is a prequel to Yakuza.
Does it have callbacks that, like, obviously when it came out, you'd already played other Yakuza games, right?
No, I actually started from 0.
Oh, okay.
And so I see it from, now that I've played both, I see both perspectives. Like from playing Yakuza, I appreciate what Yakuza 0 did.
Yeah.
But then I also I was surprised by the progression. Whereas other people were like, oh, so that's why that happened. I'm like, dude, shit, that's happened.
I played the Pirate Yakuza demo, and there is karaoke in like all the Yakuza games.
Yep. Everyone has karaoke. Everyone that I've played has like pool or darts.
What's my character? Is it Mojima? Is that
Majima Goro? Goro Majima. Yeah.
Yeah. His song had spoilers to another game in it.
Yeah. So
that was
like,
sad.
They have so much. They interlink. They're referenced in other games.
Oh, dude, can we cycle back to 14 for 1 second? Did you see the last Live Letters preview for the next raid tier?
I have not.
We are getting a disco floor, and immediately my Twitter was completely filled with Friday night. Yoshi and they were there having a good time. Like, we're going to get disco themes. I think people are going to be busting out the dance floor moves. So it immediately brought me back to Yakuza because that's where that comes from, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I fully recommend, even if you don't stream it, doing your own playthrough of.
I've been enjoying them
Yakuza
off
straight
stream.
through.
It's nice. This is going to sound weird, but it's nice as a cozy game when I'm like lying down.
So, but the other thing is like with the first time I played through, I just blasted through the story. I wanted to know the story.
So you skip side quests?
To start off with, yes, because the first time I played it, I didn't know much about it. I didn't know that
you were
half
not a
the
knower.
fun content was in side quests.
Sure.
Also, to unlock certain abilities that makes the game easier because they're your good abilities, they're unlocked through side quests. They're unlocked through mini games.
Like in Like a Dragon, there's like the Mario Kart. What's a Dragon Kart? Sorry.
Yes.
Not Mario.
Yes.
And you get different things that way too, or like extra jobs, subclasses and stuff. So I assume it's the same way in the other games.
Yeah,
maybe
very,
not
very
subclasses,
similar.
but like
So
different gear.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just.
What does
so
Yakuza 0?
good.
Does each game have like? It seems to have like a mini game that is a reference to another game.
So in
Zero happened
Yakuza
like that?
0, there are you can go into the arcades and play old Sega games.
That's sick.
So they have uploaded essentially emulators of like a Virtua Fighter and
So funny.
all that
They
sort
had
of
Virtua
stuff.
Fighter and Like a Dragon as well.
Yeah.
They also had they had like a project management mini game. And then they do, like Mario Kart.
The 2 mini games, because you play as 2 different characters in Zero. You play as Majima and Kiryu.
Okay,
I can't.
Kiryu.
Yeah,
I've seen that character referenced.
Yes, he is the main character for the first 6-7 games if you count Zero.
Oh my god.
And his story arc is fantastic. But yeah, so Kiryu has a real estate mini game.
Okay.
And Majima you manage a hostess club, which are very big in Japan. Hostess cabaret club. And then there's in one, they call it pocket car racing, pocket circuit. It's essentially like scale electrics.
Sure. That's great.
That is brilliant. Like they all have some form of
they seem to all
game.
have something like baseball too, and like
yep, baseball's good. I know golf is in one of them, but
yeah, they have darts in like all of them, right?
Darts, pool, 9-ball. One thing that they have that no matter how much I try to learn to play it, I can't wrap my head around it, is Mahjong.
I can't. There were a couple of different games in Pirate Yakuza that I just didn't understand.
So there's Mahjong and Shogi, at least one of them in every game.
Hard. That's the one I played. I didn't understand. I fluked into a victory. I'm like, I'm done. Minigame's complete.
But yeah, like Yakuza is probably one of my favorite series ever.
It's so good. I think it's extremely like not overrated. I don't want to say it's underrated because it's pretty popular, but it's like it lives up to the hype.
And that wraps up part 2 of this side quest. Probably more Monster Hunter stories, raid chaos, and general rambling than we probably intended, but that's what we're here for. If you enjoyed the ride, do the usual bits, like, comment, share it with a fellow adventurer, or play it in the background whilst you're sorting your inventory. It all helps out more than you think. If you missed part 1, go check it out, and don't worry, there's still more to come. In part 3, we're going to be diving into the bigger picture, state of the genre, DLCs, monetization trends, and have a look ahead at what games are coming down the pipeline. So if you've got strong opinions on overpriced cosmetics, you won't want to miss it. And if you want to chat about all this nonsense in real time, come hang out in our Discord. Links in the description. Thanks for joining us again. We've reached our save point. See you next time, and remember, every great adventure starts with a side quest.